Help fight Islamic terrorism. Visit www.americansagainst.hate.org.
Our last speaker, but certainly not least, this is before Congressman Colonel West, is Joe Kaufman, the chairman of Americans Against Hate and the founder of Young Zionists. He is a lecturer and investigative journalist for Front Page Magazine. Joe will speak on Fatah and other terrorist organizations.
I first want to thank all of you for attending our Florida Pro-Israel Conference 2010. I hope for you it has been an enjoyable and educational experience. I applaud our panel of speakers. And I want to thank C-SPAN for bringing this event to the national public, making what we say up here all the more important. Our message to the nation needs not only to be heard, but to be acted upon. Words have little meaning where there are no actions attached to them. And without actions, there can be no results. Last April, my wife Emily and I took a month-long fact-finding tour of Israel. We went from one side of Israel to the other, and within that oh-so-short distance, we saw everything in between, and much of what we saw was awe-inspiring. We saw magnificent waterfalls in Ein Gedi. We stood inside the ancient fortresses at Masada. We trekked through the Solomon Valley on camelback during the day and by jeep during the night. We walked amongst the mystical stones of Sfat. We gazed across what seemed to be the never-ending Knesset. I looked up at the sky as I touched and kissed the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. Israel truly is a beautiful country, and it's easy to get caught up in that beauty. That is, until you are brought back down to the reality of the threat the tiny nation faces. Most everywhere you go, there are teenagers, young Jewish boys and girls, dressed in combat fatigues, many with rifles in hands, with their fingertips on the triggers. At checkpoints leading towards nations that Israel supposedly has peaceful relations with, you receive warnings that if you pass, you go at your own risk. Israel is surrounded by enemies, and some of them are only separated from Israel by a fence or a wall. Most Palestinians are controlled by one of two organizations. In Gaza, it is Hamas, Harakat al-Muqawamat al-Islamiyah, the Muslim Brotherhood-created group which sprang from the violence of the First Intifada of 1987. And in the West Bank, or more properly Judea and Samaria, it is Fatah, Harakat al-Tahrir al-Watani al-Filistini, the main branch of the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO. Few in the West will dispute that Hamas is a terrorist organization. The group has been involved in countless terrorist acts, including a number of suicide bombings, at least one of which on Ben Yehuda Street almost took the life of my wife. As well, Hamas has a charter within which the group, in no uncertain terms, calls for the destruction of Israel. Hamas clearly is a terrorist organization, and no one except the most blind of the blind expects the group to be a peacemaker. But while Hamas is being portrayed, and rightly so, as the antithesis to peace, Fatah is hailed as peaceful and moderate. I am here to say to you and to the national audience that Fatah is none of the above. As we speak, and I checked on this morning to be sure, Fatah has on its official website, in Arabic, its official charter. And like Hamas, Fatah's charter calls for the destruction of Israel. It states, this is right off their site, Article 19 of the Fatah Constitution, Rules of Procedure of the Fatah Movement. Quote, the fight will not stop until the elimination of the Zionist entity and the liberation of Palestine, end quote. I'm holding a screenshot that I just obtained this morning with Article 19 from the actual Fatah webpage. It only takes 2 clicks of a mouse to get to it from the Fatah homepage. You may ask me, Joe, isn't this the same Fatah who the White House is courting to make peace with Israel? Whose leader Mahmoud Abbas has been seen shaking hands with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu? Yes, that's the same Fatah that I speak of. Unfortunately, both the leadership of the United States and the leadership of Israel ignore directives that their own respective governments have put out regarding Fatah. The Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs outright calls Fatah a terrorist organization. On the ministry's website, it states, quote, Fatah is a terrorist organization as defined in the Prevention of Terrorism Ordinance, end quote. Just so you know, the ordinance provides the Israeli government specific measures when dealing with terrorists and when protecting the security of its citizens, and has been in place for the past 6 decades. With regards to the United States, one has to do some research to find the terrorist designation of Fatah. First and foremost, in December 1987, then President Ronald Reagan signed into law the Anti-Terrorism Act of 1987. It states, quote, the Congress determines that the PLO and its affiliates are a terrorist organization and a threat to the interests of the United States, its allies, and to international law, and should not benefit from operating in the United States, end quote. It further states that the PLO has been implicated in the murder of Americans overseas. When the act says the PLO and its affiliates, you must understand that Fatah is the main affiliate of the PLO. Indeed, the president of Fatah, Mahmoud Abbas, is also the president of the PLO. The 1987 Anti-Terrorism Act is still law today. Let me repeat that, because it is of the utmost importance. The 87 Anti-Terrorism Act, calling the PLO and its affiliates a terrorist organization, is still law today. You ask, Joe, if that's so, if the U.S. government recognizes the PLO and Fatah as terrorist organizations, and the Anti-Terrorism Act is still the law today, then how is Mahmoud Abbas able to come to the White House, and how is the PLO able to have an office only less than 2 miles from the White House? Simple. Because President Barack Obama and President George W. Bush before him and President Bill Clinton before him signed presidential waivers every 6 months to circumvent the law. So this past October, when Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was the keynote speaker at the annual conference for the American Task Force on Palestine, an event which also featured as a speaker the United States representative to the PLO, Ma'en Erekat, she had no qualms about doing it. Indeed, she had a huge smile on her face as she took to the podium with the president of the task force, or ATFP, Ziad Assali, beside her. Here's Secretary Clinton and her smile, and here's Assali looking on. Shame on you, Hillary. Shame on you. The task force itself is connected to the PLO. Its founding president was none other than the former PLO spokesman Rashid Khalidi. You may have heard of him. His name came up a lot during Barack Obama's campaign for president. The ATFP's website even has a photo of Mahmoud Abbas along with a link to Abbas's presidential website, which contains the PLO logo atop it. The American Task Force on Palestine appears to be little more than a front for the PLO. Another example of the United States defining Fatah as a terrorist group is found in the U.S. list of foreign terrorist organizations, or FTOs. On the list is shown the main paramilitary group of Fatah, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, or AMB. AMB, like Hamas, has involvement in numerous terrorist attacks against Israeli civilians, including suicide bombings. There are those inside the government and outside who wish to draw a distinction between Fatah and AMB. They like to use the term loose connection to describe the two groups' relationship. The reality is that Fatah and AMB today are one and the same. In the past, AMB had its own official website. In fact, it had two sites. Today, those sites are gone. Now AMB only uses the Fatah official website as its official site. AMB uses the Fatah site to post its terrorist communiques, and all of them are signed by AMB, the, quote, military wing of Fatah. The big question we must ask ourselves is why? Why would our government attempt to hide law to help a terrorist organization? And really, hide is the correct term, as the last 6-month waiver was not released to the public. That is, not until I got a hold of it through someone in the State Department. Now it's up on our Americans Against Hate website, and here's a copy of it. What's interesting about the waiver is that it was not signed by the U.S. President, as all since Bill Clinton have been. The latest one was signed by Hillary Clinton's Deputy Secretary of State, James B. Steinberg. It was actually signed less than 2 weeks prior to Hillary's appearance at the American Task Force on Palestine event. Conspiracy theories aside, the State Department should at least answer as to why it did not release the document publicly and why it did not bear President Obama's signature. But getting back to our question, why would our government want to circumvent the 1987 law when it knows that Fatah is a terrorist organization? Is creating a Fatah state that important? Do we really believe that Osama is not going to target us if we force this upon Israel? Do we think the Palestinians will all of a sudden lay down their arms when their next generation has already been ruined by its community's violent hatred of the Jew? Why this obsession with the creation of a terrorist state of Palestine? I guess the answer is in the question itself. This obsession, like so many others, is irrational. It defies common sense. If you wish to make peace with someone, you have to do it with someone who wants peace, not someone who wishes to destroy you. That should be obvious. You will never have peace with someone who wants to destroy you, period. Now, if I may, I'd like a moment to speak to those in power. After all, it's not every day that I get this national forum to say what's on my mind. Again, thank you, C-SPAN. For those of you who view Israel as merely a pawn, no more than a 51st state, let me tell you, you are making a terrible mistake. Israel is an ally and a friend of America and should be treated as such. When you sit down to dialogue and have tea with Israel's enemies, you place Israel in danger. And when you place Israel in danger, you place our own nation, your own nation in danger, because Israel's enemies are our enemies. Let me repeat that. Israel's enemies are our enemies. And as so many understand, as goes Israel, so goes America. And like the good book says, quote, those who bless Israel shall be blessed, and those who curse Israel shall be cursed.
Help fight Islamic terrorism. Visit www.americansagainst.hate.org.